Hello, hello, hello again, everyone. Today, I just want to give you a quick introduction to John Keats, less of a biography, more of just an overview on his importance in British literature. So, John Keats also is from a working class background. However, he did have some formal schooling. In fact, he could have practiced medicine and lived probably a little bit wealthier and more securely than he did, but he abandoned that to go for poetry. Which was not well received by his caretakers. He was orphaned at a young age, and while he and his three siblings were left about £8,000 from his father's business, it was tied up in courts for forever, like his whole life. And today, that would have been the equivalent of about $1,339,000. All right, that's a chunk of change that he and his siblings never got. And obviously, his life could have been very different if he had had access to his inheritance. In fact, he spent most of his life struggling with poverty and had to start writing things he didn't really set out to write to try to support himself and take care of his siblings. He did feel this like foreshadowing that he was going to follow his parents and his brother's footsteps and die at a very young age. And that's one of the reasons that he wrote with such a fervor, and he was so persistent and insistent that he was going to write poetry and he was going to do big things because he just felt that he was going to die at a young age. And he ended up dying at a young age. He died at the age of 26, which is pretty young considering a lot of big names in British literature were just starting to write or just starting to get to the point where they were good. And I'm thinking of people like Shakespeare, Milton, Chaucer, Wordsworth, his contemporary, didn't really do much until that age. And yet Keats is huge, and he dies at the age of 26. He's so huge. He's considered one of the top two poets of the Romantic period, if not number one. I don't think you could really place him as number one as easily because Wordsworth is so impressive. But he's there. Critics all pretty much agree that he probably would have exceeded the fame of Chaucer, Shakespeare, and Milton and all their accomplishments. And hopefully you recognize at least one of those names, Shakespeare. But Chaucer and Milton are also huge, and they have caused a lot of things in literature. So it's pretty impressive, right? And critics are kind of like, Keats, fanboy, woo, we love him. They also argue that he was the greatest inventor in the use of English, greatest innovator in the use of English since Milton, and that he also had the imagination to rival Shakespeare. Again, just trying to show you guys that critics can't praise him enough. Keats did struggle to find his identity and value in himself to become a great poet, and that struggle for his identity leads to what became his brilliance. He wanted to hide himself as the poet in his poems, so they call that negative capability. Basically, his personality and his life were not going to intrude on his poetry, but he still wanted to have value as a poet. He still wanted to be a great poet. So this struggle, this contradiction definitely rules his life. But in his writing, his goal is to emphasize the subject matter and the insight he has in life. And because he had the struggle of, I want to be a great poet, this is what I want to do. I don't want my personality. I don't want my life. I don't want my personal thoughts coming into this. That combination made him amazing. And he also never sought answers on himself in philosophy or religion. So he escaped that, I guess you could say, taint in his work because he was using his thoughts and his experiences and his insight without it being colored by other people's thoughts and opinions, because he knew he would mimic people and he would fall into the habit of mimicking and doing what others were doing. So he tried to remove influences from his life. He was introduced to Wordsworth and Coleridge and Percy Shelley, and he kind of and Lord Byron, and kind of shunned those relationships because he wanted to be Keats. He did not want to be Keats as influenced by so-and-so. There are 4 qualities of his poems that are big, that are discussed. That's they have slow movement. It doesn't mean it's oh, I'm so tired, but it just moves at a sedate pace, and it's just a nice slow pace through things. It's not rushed, but it's got purpose. He uses all senses, not just like the five we think of, but like kinetic as well, all those things in a very concrete description. So his like descriptions are like really concrete, and you'll see that when we get to like the Ode on a Grecian Urn. Norton describes it as the delight of existence of things outside of himself. So again, that negative capability coming back. And he uses phrasing, again, compared to like Shakespeare. So the way he writes things is as original and witty and fun as Shakespeare and all those other contemporaries that came, well, not contemporaries, but all of the greats that came before him that he is now considered a contemporary of. His poems also reflect this idea that life is full of inseparable but irreconcilable opposites. So again, he just struggled a lot. There's a lot of contradictions in his life, and he felt that life was just that way, and that's what it's full of. And you will definitely see that in his poem, especially with the Nightingale, how it brought him pleasure and yet pain. And he wanted to die, but if he died, he couldn't have the pleasure of life again. So we'll get there. We'll get to it. But just know that Keats is like the big man in town, and critics love him. And while he was young, he did some pretty impressive things for his time. And so let's definitely give him the time and thought process he deserves.